There we go. So we just did a couple of introductions there for subject areas for the new guys. We've got quite a range of subjects actually, which is really good, especially for what we're going to go on to do later on today. Just a reminder about the videos available, I'll show you that. Today we're going to be looking at social inclusion and some kind of research and information and recommendations around that and the impact that can have on our students. And looking at some reflections and some sort of targets for you to take away. And hopefully we'll get on to have a bit of time to look at some of your plans and topics for the year, just in terms of ways you might be able to incorporate autism into those, because that would also be, especially when there's lots of different subjects, it'd be really good to kind of pinch ideas from each other, really. So just a reminder, and I'll send these out, there's lots of different Cognos videos on the Cognos YouTube channel. There's some short ones like this one at the bottom there, secondaries using visuals, 13-minute one that potentially could be used in a staff meeting or could be sent out to staff. I'm trying to do kind of shorter and shorter ones because that's what the demand is really for everybody's time. But it's just a useful thing, especially if you have somebody in your school coming to you saying, I've got this child in my maths set or whatever, and I don't know what to do with them. This would be a good kind of first port of call really to signpost people to. We don't want to watch that now. So going on to social inclusion, which is our sort of topic for today. We know that autistic young people are more likely to be excluded both from education and services and also socially. And this has a kind of knock-on effect, because it then leads to more instances of physical and mental health problems, withdrawal from education, and later on, much lower rates of employment. So this is kind of a big thing. And I think probably this links a lot to this mental health and employment. I think the social side of things is really key there in terms of young people feeling like they fit in, like they belong, and that they've got their kind of network of people. We know with girls, we see that kind of unmasking happening a lot more often in secondary schools. So when there's they've maybe sort of held it all together through primary and nobody's really noticed that they're really struggling with some of these things, but it all kind of comes to a head often in secondary, and that can have this knock-on effect. So any ideas here, and you could shout it out or you can chuck them in the chat. Why do you think that autistic children are more likely to be excluded generally, but also particularly from education? What might be the causes for this? Make sure I can see the chat. So we've got uncontrollable outbursts. Yep. So I suppose the knock-on effect of that, maybe the opinions then of their peers that they have on them, that they might want to avoid that individual if they don't understand why they're having those outbursts. Playing up in class, fidget, sing. So I guess with that one as well, is that then the attitudes of the others towards that rather than the actual behavior itself, the kind of lack of understanding from the peer group, which is the next one, lack of understanding, which could be for them and from the peer group. Too honest can cause offense. Yep. Though I had a teacher really recently saying to me this was actually a strength, that this honesty can be really good, because obviously you then know exactly where you stand with that pupil and where they're at. They'll tell you if they're struggling or if they're not interested in what you're telling them. Or may do. Sensory overload, social interaction. So not understanding social rules and cues, literal thinking, expressing frustration at being unable to access work or suitability of learning environment. Yep, so we've got a range here. Quite a lot of them are about the individual themselves, but we have got some where people have suggested, the environment might be a factor. So some of the things that has been shown, and this is from some research from the Autism Education Trust, or the AET, and they've published this paper exploring kind of all into this area. And they've said some of the key things that affect social inclusion are peer relationships, and the relationships between the young person, the autistic young person, and the staff, and which therefore links to their sense of belonging and how they feel about school. So whether they like being at school, whether they have that sense of belonging and feeling of kind of being part of something. And where these things are positive, this is a protective factor against this exclusion, feelings of isolation, etc. So we're going to look at a couple of case studies. These are based on some young people I've worked with in secondary settings. And I want you to have a think about, through maybe your school day, where might they face potential isolation socially? So Amelia loves roller coasters, mainly only talks about roller coasters. That's her thing. She doesn't talk about being autistic, so doesn't share that with others. Her peers describe her as geeky, and she doesn't seem to have any friends. So I'm going to, for this one, I'll get you to put it in the chat, and then I'm going to share a different one that I'm going to put you briefly into breakout rooms for. So we've got some things coming in. Breaks and lunchtime, yep, definitely. Those unstructured times. Group tasks in class, definitely. Break, lunchtimes, after school, social settings, yep. So maybe some students are hanging around after school doing some homework or working on a project together. Meeting friends, waiting at the bus stop. Sports lessons, yep, maybe they have to decide their own partners. Tutor time, yeah, definitely. Yeah, some good examples there. So quite some big chunks of the day, and depending on the subject, how much group task time there is, and whether there's like seating plans or they choose their own seats in lessons, there could be quite a few opportunities or missed opportunities for inclusion. So next one, we've got Tosi. So Tosi likes gaming and likes other hobbies that his peers share. So he's got kind of similar interests to his peers. He also doesn't talk about being autistic. He plays the role of the comedian or joker. On the surface, he appears to be popular and have friends. However, he doesn't see them outside school. He's had a few altercations due to inappropriate messaging. So with him, I'm going to, or with you, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms just to briefly discuss this one in your groups. If I can find the breakout rooms, where have they gone? Might have to stop sharing. Hang on a second. Right, and I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes just to discuss, and there might be that students that you work with come to mind, and feel free to share them if you want to as well. And then I'll call you back in kind of 3 minutes probably. Right, it should pop up on your screen, and you'll be in groups of 3s, I think. Put the recording. Welcome back. Right, let's hear. Oh, we're waiting. Some people obviously still engaged in discussions. I'll just wait for them to come back because they have like a minute time cap. Right, those of you who are back, any comments on Tosi? Let me share my screen again so you can just recap. Can you see the full screen with Tosi written on it? Yeah, lovely. Any thoughts or comments on him and things that might be going on? Potentially a bit more than last time, or different from last time, I should say.
I said that he might be vulnerable and open to suggestion if he's trying to make friends and please others, and he plays the role of the comedian or the joker, that people could potentially get him to do things, or he will do things to please them and get himself into trouble, but
yeah,
think
definitely.
that he's doing the right thing.
Yeah, and this was based with a student I worked with in one of the schools who was actually, in the end, he had a kind of managed move to a different school because that's exactly what happened. It kind of got himself into different situations. But on the surface of it, initially, it was, everything socially seemed to be doing pretty well, because he was always, when you looked outside, he was with other kids. He was, engaging in conversations or playing games and stuff, but when you kind of went a bit under the surface, yeah, it was a bit more complex than that. Any other comments on this one? And again, you can put in the chat if you're more comfortable with that. Any thoughts on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's just to say, we were talking about the fact that, you know, not only peer relationships could be suffering, but also his relationships with the staff, and leading to how he felt about school, because if he is being the comedian, being the joker in class, that's likely to alienate the teachers as well.
Yeah, very good point. And we know that in the film industry, there's quite a high percentage of people who are autistic, because autistic individuals often find it's useful kind of having a script and being told, right, this is the persona that you're taking on, which kind of links to that whole masking. So actually, if, you know, it could have started in primary school, that one day he made a joke, whether intentionally or not, and was kind of labeled as being a little bit silly or whatever. Often it starts off as well as something that's completely unintentional, and they've, you know, when the teacher says, like, do you want to go to assembly, and they say, no, actually I would rather stay in here, and then they're told, you know, you're answering back, but actually they were taking it as a literal question, and then suddenly they're saying, oh, like everyone else is laughing, like they want to be my friends now because they think I'm funny. So then they start, you know, acting to that persona, but maybe not fully seeing the potential implications, like you said, with longer term friendships, but also with staff and teachers as well. Any thoughts on this, both of them, who don't talk about being autistic? Why might that be? What might the implications of that be?
Yeah, can I just sort of ask a question? We've been finding that lots of not lots of them, but several of our autistic children don't want to admit to their condition or don't want their friends to know about it. And then we've got a couple who've got ADHD and autism, and they seem happy to share that they've got ADHD, but don't want people to know about the autism.
Yeah, so ADHD has become, I don't want to say trendy because that's the wrong word, but there's a lot, like on TikTok and things like that, of like how to know if you've got ADHD traits. This kind of celebrities that are talking about their own ADHD are more kind of identifiable or relatable for young people. So it is kind of seen as a bit more socially acceptable, I think, for students to talk about that. The autism kind of pride is a little bit behind, but it is getting there, and I think there's some resources I can share as well on we did this like autism support map that's got a few kind of books and some like YouTube accounts that can be quite useful for young people to follow. There's a lot of autistic individuals on Instagram posting about their day-to-day life, and TikTok and stuff as well, so that can be a good way in for young people. I think that's why I kind of tend to promote like Autism Week and having autism awareness assemblies and things like that, but going beyond that, so that it's not just, oh, we have this, it's a bit like Black History Month. It's good to celebrate and acknowledge it, but actually that kind of stuff should be embedded through the year, really. So and I think the more that's done, and the more, you know, in some schools we've got teachers talking about their own experiences as being autistic, or older students giving presentations, so they've then got visible kind of role models and are more likely to then talk about that and then kind of own it. Because obviously if you can own it and say, I'm like, while you're talking to me, it's better if I look away because I can concentrate better, then the other person is less likely to say, oh, they're really weird, they never look at me, because you're explaining kind of your rationale and why that works for you, and that can be really empowering. So yeah, so that's a kind of important one to note about that can be, and it's such a complicated topic because often there's whole underlying stuff going on with parents as well, and maybe parents haven't fully told the child, or are not as in some cases they're not as kind of ahead on their own journeys of acceptance and understanding. So it's a complicated one, but I think the more it's like, you know, on displays and things like that around the school, that can be really helpful just to create that atmosphere. So if we go on to some of the things that can help with this, So the information from the Autism Education Trust identified 5 key areas related to the kind of peer interventions. So social understanding and the skills of the autistic young person. So that's often the thing that comes up first of all, like we were saying earlier on in the chat about maybe their lack of understanding or being too honest. So there should be some kind of support around their own sort of social skills. But there needs to be information and kind of guidance to support their peers as well, because there's this a kind of approach called the double empathy problem, which was initiated by an autistic adult who I think he's a professor actually, who he was saying, you know, all the focus is on giving the autistic person social skills, so learning how to be more neurotypical basically, but it was saying where's the opposite, where are the kind of autistic social skills lessons for neurotypical people, like how are you as a non-autistic teacher learning to communicate with your autistic student, and likewise for the peer group. So it shouldn't, the onus shouldn't be completely on the young person. And in schools where I've done a series of kind of assemblies and form time kind of videos and things to watch, we've seen a knock-on effect of that, of students starting to be a bit more understanding of each other and also reflecting on themselves and thinking, oh, actually I struggle with certain things here, and you know, maybe this could be something that's relevant to me. And a lot of young people may have siblings as well, or somebody in their family who's autistic, so it can be quite validating for them as well to hear this being spoken about. So support structures implemented by teachers. So the teachers in your setting, do they know enough about the kind of strategies that help with learning, and are they implementing them? And sometimes when I do training, I try and do kind of the understanding first and then the strategies, because sometimes you're given a load of strategies, but if you don't understand why you're doing them and what the purpose is of it, you're often not going to kind of buy into it. So it may be they've got the strategies, but they're not really doing them because they don't know why. School-wide efforts and knowledge. So school-wide, like I was talking about, assemblies, displays, things going out in the school newsletter, maybe coffee mornings for parents. I think that ties into the next one actually. So the last one is engaging families in the process. So how do parents, because I don't have data on it, but I'm sure there is data on the families also being socially isolated. How are you bringing them into the school community, particularly in secondaries when they may have been really used to, at primary, being at the school gates every day, meeting other parents, dropping off, which may or may not have been a good thing, because at primaries often parents will say that, you know, the teacher's always saying, oh, can I speak to you, blah blah, I had a bad day again today. So maybe they're really relieved not to be at the school gates, but they're not getting that same kind of interaction with other parents and you guys as staff. So thinking about what your school could be doing. Now, with some of these things, we're going to look at them in a bit more detail. It may be that you have no control over this stuff based on your role, but you can obviously pass some of this information on to the people who do have control over it, and there'll be bits of it that you do have control over as well. So what I want you to do, and I'm not going to make you share all of these, but we might share some of the numbers in the chat anonymously, if that makes sense. Have a bit of a reflection time. I'll give you a couple of minutes yourself for those 5 areas that were on the last slide. I want you to have a think from your point of view where you think your school is for each of these. So with 1 being rubbish and 5 being wonderful, where do you think your school fits on each of these 5? So I want you to give a score for all of those 5 points below, and I might get you to share which one scored the highest and which one scored the lowest, but there's no pressure to do that if you don't want to. So I'll give you a couple of minutes now just to have a bit of a think about that. So with Cassandra, 1 and 3, is that 1 was the, oh, number 1 scored a 3, is that? Because you don't have to put these, yeah, so keep the scores to yourself for now, because it's just for your own kind of reflection and for your school's reflection, because you might want to go away and do this with somebody else from your school. But then I might get you to share once we've had a bit of time. So just keep it to yourself for the moment and write it on a bit of paper or something. Okay. So you can, so I see a couple of people have shared. Now it can stay completely private because this is quite a sort of personal school thing. But if you'd like to, can you share the number? So you only write one number of the thing that scored the worst on your for your school. So which of the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which one was the lowest scoring one? And it might be there's a couple. So like for James, he's got his lowest scoring is 1 and 4. So children and young people and school-wide efforts. Interesting. So I did this last week with primaries, and there was a pattern for them. They all kind of said similar ones. I think theirs was 2 and 4, but you've got quite a variety here. So we've got 1, 1 and 4, 2 and 3, 1 and 4, 4, 2, 1, 1. This was the worst scoring, wasn't it? Is that what I said? Yeah. 2 and 4 were 1. Okay. Yeah. So so a lot of people have said 4. That's the kind of most common one, which is that school-wide efforts and knowledge, which I would probably agree with in terms of what I know about the general picture in the borough. And what, so no, we'll come back to that. So now could you put in which scored the best, the highest? So 3. 3. I like the question mark there. 3. Okay, so quite a few people saying 3. Interesting. So we had 1. So Cassandra, that 4 was your highest scoring one. I can see you, can I, Cassandra? No. So we might have to come to Cassandra for some tips. 2 and 5. So the peers and families. Okay, interesting. So James, if you could put in the chat or shout out, what do you think that you're doing well in terms of the peer group, improving the attitudes and knowledge for your peers? So number 2. And Cassandra, what do you think you're doing well in terms of school-wide efforts and knowledge? I'd be interested to hear kind of what those look like for you guys.
So in tutor time with the students, we have like a PDP program, and it covers a range of issues from like safeguarding to mental health. And yeah, part of it is the various sort of needs that lots of people in schools have to deal with, really. So we have done sessions on ADHD. There has been a bit on autism as well. But we haven't had any sort of sessions specifically for autism or anything. It's just quite generally covered.
Okay.
The PD program.
Is that a program that you buy into, or is it something you've?
No, it's something the school's created. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah, it's good. It's good to have that in like form time or that kind of group time. Is that something other schools do, but to different degrees, or because I know
I'm not aware of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
What other schools here do you? Because obviously I think most schools have like form time, tutor time, where it cover, you know, like you said, sort of consent, all those kind of things. let me know if any of you guys do it, but in a different way. We've got here, Cassandra said, we're very good at talking about needs to be done, implementing things, spaces to support students. Yeah, so the bridge is your kind of specialist area, isn't it, for students to go to? That was school-wide efforts, okay. Series of PSHE lessons on neurodiversity. Okay, that's good. Yeah, and I think it's those things are a really good starting point, and then it's what we can do kind of on top of that as well to drip feed it into lessons, or well, not even just lessons, just kind of the whole curriculum, or whole school day, really. So let's go on to the next bit. So sometimes you can still see my screen, can't you? Yeah, lovely. So sometimes people say, oh, if we put this strategy in place, what about the rest of the class? What are they going to think? And or about that, person being singled out and getting kind of special treatment. But researchers found that the inclusion of autistic young people in the classroom actually has a beneficial impact on the non-autistic students. So in terms of attitudes and intentions. And my hope is that if we're creating this generation of young people that are more understanding of neurodiversity and everybody's differences, they're obviously going to grow up to be the next generation of employers, and hopefully that will impact on the employment statistics for autistic individuals, because actually they will be more understanding of how they might be able to support their peers generally. So I think this stuff it's going to have a long, like, it's not going to be, you're not going to see the impact quickly, but I do think that this stuff's really important and is going to have a longer term impact. So some of the proactive strategies to help with these areas. So improved autism awareness for everybody. So it's tricky, really tricky in secondaries, because there's so many different staff and lots of people working on different days at different times and things. But when I do training in schools, I try, where possible, we try, if it's like a whole school specialist, generic training, I would try and get everybody involved, including the people in the canteen, the people on the front desk, because sometimes those can be the times, like we've said, those unstructured times when actually you've lost your PE kit, you've got to go to student services, or you've got to go to reception, or you need to go and get your lunch, but you've forgotten how to, use your lunch card. Those are when those interactions can happen that actually can be quite tricky. And if those staff members understand autism as well, that can have quite a big impact. Those partnerships with parents and local community, so engaging in kind of events that are going on locally in terms of autism and those kind of celebration events. And strategies that enable autistic young people to engage more. So we're going to have a think about what they might look like. So thinking about reasonable adjustments. So adapting maybe some of the routines and systems that are in place. So that might be at times like break and lunchtime, on trips or extracurricular activities, things like work experience, exams, adaptations that could be made either to the environment, the room, or to do with staff, how staff are interacting or communicating, what their expectations are, all of those kind of things. An example of this, so in one of the secondaries I work in, we set up a lunch club. So it was initially for year 7 and 8, kind of obviously with the aim being that it's a good starting point for the new year 7s, just running one lunchtime a week, but it was somewhere that those students could come, eat their lunch. It's much quieter obviously than anywhere else in the school, and we had some like board games. And it's adapted over time. So some of the students, as they came along, they said, oh, we'd really like to play table tennis. So we've got one of those clip-on table tennis things you can put on one of the tables. But what's really lovely about that is that quite a few times we've had students who have just appeared, who have been on our radar as ones kind of who have potentially got autistic traits, and they've just turned up at this club, which is not advertised. They've just been kind of wandering past, and it's that kind of find your tribe sort of moment where they've seen, this looks like quite a nice calm environment, and come in and talked about all sorts. And I think it just shows that kind of the need for that sort of specialist space. And we've seen really good progress in terms of the young people and their interactions with each other and kind of being able to joke a bit more with each other. One of the case studies about the girl who loved roller coasters was based on that. So this girl, that was her thing. She would get every conversation would come back to roller coasters, and she would kind of do it in quite a scripted way. And that became a kind of bit of a jokey banter between some of the students, that they would say, oh, how did you manage to get it back to roller coasters again? Like, nice move there. And it was just quite sweet to see them kind of joking around, and this student felt included with it. So I wonder if you have got any examples of this sort of stuff going on in your schools. Do you have specific lunch clubs? Do you have anything where students who find the kind of big social spaces overwhelming, is there somewhere that they can go? Is there something that they can do? Any adaptations for some of these things, trips, exams, etc.? And if not, you've got your first action to go and think about. I know, Cassandra, you mentioned the bridge. I don't know if you want to maybe put in the chat or say a bit more about what that actually is and what that looks like. We've got here, Anna, thank you. One teacher offers their classroom one lunchtime as a quiet room for a year group. Lovely. And they can be quite, you know, they don't need too many resources or sort of staffing. Wellbeing room. That's nice. So are the wellbeing champions other students? Who's that, James? Sixth formers, that's really nice. Lovely. And that's a model that we've used actually with autism. So it might be something you want to consider in terms of kind of neurodiversity champions, where if you've got some students who are confident talking about their own autism, ADHD, etc., but particularly autism, that can be really nice if there's sort of autistic kind of peers. We tried, again, with the lunch club we were doing, we had some older students come and talk to the younger ones. And I think, in fact, we then had some students from another school come over. So in this school, actually, it was a boys' secondary, boys' grammar, and some of the girls' grammar came over for this lunch club, which worked really well. And it's a nice social opportunity as well to kind of meet others. We had one boy where his specialist interest was trains, but it was he didn't like steam trains. It had to be kind of modern trains. And we tried to find out, you know, anybody else in the school, but I think it was put into the registers, anybody like trains, any year groups. Nobody was willing to admit that they did. So in the end, we set up a like a Zoom social interaction with somebody from another school, but he was, I think this boy was year 10 and the other one was year 8 or something. But so it kind of became a little mentoring thing, but they could both talk about trains, because he needed somebody that was on his level, that you know really understood and had knowledge of how many visitors came to each train station, etc. So you can think creatively. It doesn't have to stay within your school. It's about finding somebody else who's kind of on the same wavelength really as that person. Zoe, I run an ASD group, all sit down and talk. That's nice, and it's nice when it can be kind of led by them as to what the topics are, because we found with the lunch club as well, it depends on the aims of it, but with the lunch club, we had all these plans of things we were going to talk about, and actually we found that they needed it to be kind of youth led at that time, where they were dictating what the kind of where it was going a bit more. A path children can go to when they're feeling overwhelmed. It's good to also think with that as about how, because some children or young people will find it too stressful to use the pass. So whether there's kind of adaptations for people who can't do that, and sometimes with time limits, it might be that in some schools they have like 15 minutes in the room, but actually that's not long enough to regulate, for example. So it's worth thinking about things around that. Quieter space in the library, lovely. There to listen. Planning to run lunch clubs, great. Library, yes, libraries often are the safe space, aren't they? A lot of secondary libraries I go into, and so it's then thinking about, okay, how can you utilize that library space? So in one of the schools I've been in, we've ordered loads of books, and I'll share the book list at the end as well. which either feature autistic characters or they're written about autism. And they've created like a little spinning display thing in the corner of the library, so that then the children who are in there can suddenly see, oh, this is like books that are relevant to me, and could create discussions and all of that stuff. So this was the bridge is a calm, safe space, team to support, sensory rooms. That's quite unusual, isn't it, having sensory rooms in secondary. Lunch club with board games, great. Yeah, so it's good to see there's some things going on, and it's kind of how to build on that as well. You've kind of had a bit of a think already about some of the things you're already doing. I'm going to come out of here and share a Jamboard link with you, if I can get it. Hang on a second. And on there, basically, let me put it in the chat. Where's the chat gone? I want you to try and write an action from this part of the kind of the social interaction side of things, social inclusion. An action for you personally, something you want to go away and do over the next sort of half term, and something for your school setting. So this is where you can take it away to somebody else in your setting and say, oh, they were talking about this today, and I think we should start thinking about it. So thinking back as well to the student support, the peer support, the school-wide support, parent family support, all of that kind of stuff. Everyone got the link all right? And just to say, so to be able to write something, if you click on the side, the fourth button down, there's a little sort of, it looks like a post-it note, and that will create a sticky note, and you can just type, and it will then, if I just type nonsense, it will appear like that as a kind of a coloured post-it note, basically. I will get rid of that. So you should just be able to type straight into that. I've lost you all now, so let me try and find you again. Somebody's doing something, that's good. Oh, it's because I had the chat open too big. So in fact, put your personal ones over on the left. Oh, I should say personal, and your school on the right. Lovely. So we've got someone, a school one, a daily quiet room for reading, etc. Yep, that's good. Personal, look to read more books for autism. Great. Yeah, Reason I Jump is a good book. I've got some lists I can send generally, but I'm trying to think some of the best books. Depends what you're a fan of. This is reminding me of some other bits here, actually. So
I'm
a
not
couple.
able to get a sticky note, I'm afraid.
You're not? Who's saying that?
Nicola, it just, when I click on it, nothing happens.
Oh, I don't know. My only suggestion is to come out and go back in again. It's a bit like the old turn it off, on and on again. That's basically the extent of my IT advice. Oh, someone else put something in the chat, have they?
Should I just put it in the chat?
Yes, good idea. Somebody else said this. Sticky notes aren't working.
Yeah.
That's strange. I'll put the link in again, but yes, that's fine. I'll add some of the ideas on as well. So we've got personal reading. Oh, so reading up on the topics yourself, I guess that is. Autism week, lovely. engaging families more. Yeah. And that could be, you know, coffee mornings. Somebody the other day was talking about having like a SCN or neurodiversity feature in the newsletter, even if it's just like a little section each time. So there's something to maybe get people thinking about that language more. I'm going to try and copy some of these onto there so that they're all on the Jamboard. So next time we can look back at them. Lunchtime clubs, great. See what they're already doing. Yes, ask parents what they want. That's a good idea, isn't it? Actually ask people. Student, yep, lovely. It was the Wellbeing Champions, great. It's good to see that lots of people using young people to support each other. Assemblies, yep. Children's books, great. Relevant display, yes, lovely. I've seen that being quite powerful as well when you have different children coming to look around the school for the open evenings and stuff. If they see, you know, if they're autistic and they see that on a display, they're like, oh, it automatically gives a sense that they would be valued in that setting. Okay, great. So a few things there. People that were asking about some of the books. So if you're into, I don't know if you, yeah, you should be able to see me. This one, oh, it's got the blurry thing on it. Okay, it's called Neurotribes. It's quite a thick one. So if you like a kind of historical, you know, lots of information, that's quite a good one. And it talks through kind of like the history of autism and lots of different things. It is interesting. This is another good one, The Passionate Mind by it was Wendy Lawson, it's now Wen Lawson, because they've transitioned genders. But again, this is about how autistic people think and learn. So there's quite a lot of theories there which are useful as well. Girls and Autism is another good one. This is a nice one to dip in and out of because it's got different chapters from different people. So you've got some from young people themselves and adults, then you've got some from parents, some from professionals, and there's lots of different kind of themes: education, adolescence, social networks. So there's a couple there that are kind of useful, but I'll share that they're ones that are recommended for your sort of library as well. So we've got a few other ideas here. Great. Autism ambassadors, lovely. That's something I've been thinking about a lot as well. So this could be something that we actually potentially sort of develop through this group. SEN Teacher of the Week. That's nice. That's something you already do. That's good. Highlight which teachers are doing things to make lessons accessible. That's really nice. Okay. So if you can get onto the Jamboard, you can go click onto the second page. If you can't, I will click onto it on here. Where's my screen gone? Hang on, wrong bit. So many things open on here. Right, so I wanted to just spend the last kind of 5-10 minutes thinking about, yes, I will send the book names out, I recommended. Thinking about some of the topics that you potentially are doing or schemes of work, and how you might be able to link that to autism. So for example, if you having kind of a topic around well-being or identity, you might want to focus on the book A Kind of Spark, which is what one of our, I think that was a year 7 group did in their tutor time. They all read this book and discussed the main character. So it's a fiction book, but again, it prompts lots of discussions around autism and identity. We have got, if you're doing a topic on composers, it might be looking at somebody like Beethoven and discussions around him potentially being autistic. And you can then discuss, you know, you can't diagnose people when they're dead. Why is that? Looking at what the autism diagnosis means. If you're doing something around the environment or climate change, you could look at Greta Thunberg. There's a couple of ideas there. So I wondered if you're in the Jamboard, if you want to add some ideas you've already got, if you're not in the Jamboard, you can put them in the chat. Any topics that you have got and links, you might already have links, because then if you're an English teacher with a link and we've got other English teachers in every school, they can steal your ideas, or you can inspire them, I should say. So if you've got any ideas for links, put them in the chat or Jamboard. If you've just got a topic, then that's fine, just pop it in there and we can maybe try and think of some links. And I'll check all the things from the chat are on there as well. Okay. So on the chat, oh, leaving early, that's fine. I'll send out the recording anyway. Let's check what we've got on the Jamboard. History of autism, yeah. You can link that to some of the books and resources I said about. Psychology, language, thought and communication, non-verbal communication, eye contact. Yeah, it's a good one, psychology. We mentioned the fact research into this area has been really useful in helping autistic people learn to use eye contact. Be great to add research examples of support. Oh, interesting. So because eye contact is so it's a bit of a debatable one. Because so historically it was seen as kind of a sign of showing that you're listening. So, and again, it'd be interesting to know what happens in your schools in terms of like what you're teaching to show that you're listening. So some schools are very like sit up straight, face the teacher, put your hands in your lap, you know, that kind of body cues. But a lot of autistic people will say that they actually don't listen in that way. So they need to maybe be moving because of their sensory system. They might need to look somewhere else. And that book that I mentioned, this Passionate Mind one, which only shows if I'm with it, that talks about, which I think I touched on before, the attention tunnel of autism, and which is called monotropism, and the theory that autistic people can often only focus on one thing in greater depth than others can. So so some people will say, if I'm looking at you, I then can't listen to you. So for some people, and not everybody, it can be a barrier to communication actually. So I would then be talking to those students about how you can say, if you've got an interview, for example, where somebody's going to be judging you on that sort of thing, where you can say, I'm going to listen to you better if I look away. So I hope you don't think I'm being rude, or something like that, or I'm autistic and I'm going to do that. But yeah, I need to, I'll have a look to see if I can find some research on that, because the sort of learning to use eye contact has been seen more recently as potentially a kind of can be damaging in some cases. Each half term we read a book for pleasure in English. Lovely. Curious Incident, that's good. The Curious Incident one I know is being used quite a lot in drama as well. So again, you can go and watch it at the theatre. They've explored how the character is being presented, because that's an interesting one, because the author said shortly after it was released, I think people were like, oh, it sounds like the character's autistic. And he was like, oh yeah, they are. And then I think maybe the more he found out about autism, or maybe he faced some backlash, I don't know, but he then retracted it and said he wished he hadn't said that, and that the character is just a character. So again, that's a good thing. You could have a debate about how are they presented. Do you think that's a fair representation, etc. Art, textiles, historical work, links to neurodivergent artists, great. And this is the kind of thing you want to see, just it being weaved through the curriculum the whole year, so that you can, if you're autistic, you might be diagnosed in year 10, but you already know what autism is because you've had it in these lessons. You're already seeing it as a positive thing. And obviously I'm saying this to the primaries as well. So hopefully they're coming up to you with the basics in place, already thinking it's, you know, positive connotations, etc. Okay, great. Some good ideas there. Did I miss anything on the chat? Oh, not the chat, the Jamboard, no. So right, let me just quickly come back to the screen. So that's the wrong one, hang on. Okay, so just to quickly finish up, couple of points on PowerPoints. So you might have noticed on here, I try and have a slightly coloured background, so not completely white. And for students generally who are neurodivergent, that can help with processing. So if possible, try and get your teachers across the school to put a slight tint on the background. That can also then be used as a visual cue. So it could be the start of the lesson always has a light blue background, the main activity has light yellow, and the plenary or end piece is light green or something. So then it's giving a bit of a cue to where you're at in the lesson as well. You want them to be clear, not too busy, not too many colors, not, you know, giving you a kind of visual headache when you're looking at them. Ideally, if I'm coming in to observe a lesson, it's really good to see the steps to success on the board, and that's going to benefit quite a lot of students. So if they're doing a task, often this kind of the task list is written there, but what does it mean when I need to write a description of the character? How do I start that? What do I need to include? So some kind of actual breakdown of the steps in that task you're asking them to do. And a couple of points on the visuals. So these are fonts that are seen as being kind of dyslexic, neurodiversity friendly. There are others, so you can type in and you can search for dyslexia friendly fonts, and there's some that you can actually download. The ones I put A's next to are the ones that have got the kind of A's without the hat. Being aware of the size, so for some students they may need 12 to 14 point font. Obviously that's can link to, you know, accessibility in terms of exams and things, how big they need their font to be, but it's just to kind of be aware of that. 1.5 spacing can help. Underlining and italics are to be avoided in terms of visual processing. It's better to use bold for emphasis if possible. So just a couple of points there you may already be aware of, and they're kind of more general than just autism, but I just thought I'd kind of throw them in at the end there really. And that's where some of the guidance has come from if you want to see a bit more of that as well. Just to point out again, I think I have mentioned before, but we're on Twitter and Facebook as the Autism Service. So I post quite a lot of different ideas and tips there. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook actually as Rebecca Duffer. So there's different resources and tips on there you can always look at as well. And just before you all go, I'm going to quickly put the evaluation in if I can find it. I will, as somebody else asked about the book list, I'll send them the adult books as well as the children's books that I mentioned, and I'll send the slides and the other resources that I talked about. I've just put the evaluation in the chat, so it'd be great. Oh, hang on, I've sent it just to one person. It would be great if you're able to quickly fill that out. If there was something in here today that you thought, actually, it'd be really good if we could all just discuss how to put into place autism champions in our school, for example, how to train older students to support younger students, let me know, because that's the beauty of it being primary and secondary separate, is that we can make sure that it's kind of meeting the needs for you guys. Likewise, if there's a particular sort of area of need in your school, let me know, because it might be that you're all saying the same thing, and that's something else we need to kind of consider. So before I leave you all to it, any questions, anything anybody wanted to ask before we finish up? Don't think so. Oh, somebody was in the waiting room. Hopefully they haven't been sitting there the whole time. No, they've just been in and out, I think. Okay, thank you very much. I'll make sure I send that stuff out to you later on. The recording will come a bit later, but I'm sure you don't want to watch it straight away. And I hope you all have a good week. Take care.